Tudor had an alternative sitting under our noses for 3 years. Hi everyone and welcome to Shaluso, and yes, today we are talking about possibly the best alternative to the Rolex Daytona Lemans, which was recently discontinued, that's been sitting under our noses for nearly 3 years. And that is of course the Tudor Black Bay Chrono, specifically the updated version from 2021. Now, followers of this channel will know that I actually used to own a Black Bay Chrono, but I used to own the original Black Bay Chrono, which was released in 2017. Mechanically, this is the same. It still featured the B01 on the inside. It's still 200 meters water resistant, screwed on pushers, 41 millimeters. But the original version was 15.4 millimeters thick, had a steel bezel and an all matte black dial. Whereas in 2021, Tudor decided to introduce an updated version that not only introduced 2 dial variations, which people went crazy for at the time, one of them being a reverse Panda, we'll get to that in a moment, but the second being that they slimmed down the Tudor Black Bay Chrono by nearly a millimeter, making it go from a watch that was, by my own admission, quite unwieldy and a pain to have on a NATO, to a watch that was much more in line with other automatic chronographs at the time. Now, of course, the Rolex Daytona is unparalleled in this department and will probably continue to be unthreatened by anything that isn't powered by an El Primero. But if you put that aside for a moment and remember that the equivalent Daytona Le Mans at retail costs nearly 10 times what a Tudor Black Bay Chrono costs, and it's been discontinued, and it has a hype train so big that it goes well into 6 figures if you're looking at the pre-owned market, it suddenly comes to light that Tudor has had this perfect alternative to a Daytona Le Mans for nearly 3 years. When you look at the dial, right away you see those echoes of vintage evocative racing chronographs. The white sub-dials, the high contrast, the dashes of red, it all kind of works. And Tudor had this long before Rolex even introduced their updated Daytona with the metal rings around their ceramic bezels. Of course, the Tudor still uses an anodized aluminum bezel, but this is just more in keeping with its idea of being a vintage chronograph. The screwed-on pushers, of course, remain, echoing the Daytona. Not really a feature I'm a big fan of, but it does mean that the Tudor also has 100 more meters of water resistance compared to the Daytona. All of these things add up because you need to remember that Tudor build quality is essentially Rolex build quality. They've stepped their game up so far, and they offer a much more accessible price point when you consider their Rolex equivalent. On the inside, they're still using a Breitling B01 based caliber, but that's actually not a bad thing at all. It still has a vertical clutch column wheel chronograph. It has 70 hours of power reserve. This, combined with a chronometer certification, means that it's actually quite competitive with the Daytona on specs at least, and it features a date. But we are of course talking about a racing chronograph, and what does the Black Bay Chrono have to do with racing? It's a fair enough question. But even this year, the year that Rolex decided to discontinue the Daytona Le Mans, they decided to imbue Tudor with a little bit more racing heritage than what it may have had in the past. In 2024, Tudor was announced as one of the sponsors of Visa Cash App RB, one of the most ridiculously named F1 teams, but an F1 team nonetheless. Tudor has thrust itself into the racing world at a perfect time. This does mean that, for the time being, this is your best alternative if you want a vintage-styled racing chronograph from the Rolex group that still features an advanced chronograph on the inside, bulletproof reliability, solid usability, and thanks to them shaving off that millimeter of thickness, decent proportions as well. Honestly, if I was still in the market for a racing themed chronograph like this, you would have to seriously consider it, just because now it has so much more going for it than it did back when I owned one. I loved mine when I owned it, but it was always too thick for me for my preference. But it's interesting though seeing how Tudor has managed to sneak in this alternative to a watch that wasn't even released yet when it was first announced. And time will tell us whether this was a smart move, whether Tudor was ahead of the game, or whether they have something else in store for us. But in the meantime, the Tudor Black Bay Chrono remains one of the best value chronographs you can get in the new or the pre-owned space. And on that note, I'd like to thank today's sponsor CHRONEXT for lending in the Tudor Black Bay Chrono featured throughout this video. They have a huge range of new, pre-owned and vintage Tudors, so make sure you check the links in the description below if you're after one. But more importantly, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of the Tudor Black Bay Chrono? Do you think that this is actually the alternative to the Daytona Lemans that perhaps we never considered because it was always a bit more in the Daytona's shadow? Or do you think that Tudor has something even more special in the pipeline? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Of course, if you like this video, then make sure you like it and share it. If you want to see more pictures and infographics of watches as featured throughout this and all of my other videos, then make sure you follow me on Instagram at Shaluso. If you want to see more videos of watches, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell as well so you know when the next video comes out. And if you want to see more Tudor content, then make sure you check out my Tudor playlist, including my review of the Tudor Black Bay Harrods, which is probably one of the most hyped Tudors that has now become a much more accessible prospect. But thanks for joining me on this quick exploration of the Tudor Black Bay Chrono with the reverse Panda dial, and we'll catch you on the next video.